So hi, I'm Anja, and I actually work at the Natural History Museum. So I'm your neighbor along the way, and together with my colleague Markus Ahola, I'm responsible for the Swedish seal monitoring program that's funded by HAV. So I thought I would take this opportunity and come and tell you a little bit about the work we do. So as you all know, the seals are the top predators, and as such, they can act as sentinels of change, and since they're sensitive to changes in all levels of the ecosystem, and are sensitive to the impact of environmental contaminants, underwater noise, how the fish stocks are doing, if diseases come in, and other anthropogenic disturbances. But they're also part of Sweden's national environmental monitoring program as directed by the EU Marine Strategy Framework, and various conventions that we've signed, for example, OSPAR and HELCOM, which I work with towards protection of seals. So as most of you probably know, we have 3 seal species in the Baltic. So we have ringed seals, and the dark blue areas here are where they are most common. In Sweden, it's in Bothnia Bay. And then we have grey seals, which are managed as one unit across the entire Baltic. And then harbor seals, there's a small population here in Kalmarsund, and most of them are found on the west coast. The grey seal, which I will focus on today, is the biggest and the most common seal in the Baltic Sea. And it is recovering from a population crash. In the early 1900s, there were about 100,000 grey seals in the Baltic, and they were hunted very heavily as they were considered, or still are, considered competition to fisheries. So the population crashed quite heavily. There were bounties on the seals, and this is what the data here is modeled on. All the seal bounties paid out to hunters. And then there were the environmental contaminants caused sterility in the seals, so they were unable to recover from this population crash. So in the 1970s, there were about 4,000 seals in the Baltic Sea. And this is around the time that the Natural History Museum started studying the seals also. The life cycle of the grey seal just simply is that the pups are born sometime between February and late March. And then they nurse for about 3 weeks. They molt every year, mid-May. And this is the time where you can see the most number of seals on land at the same time. And this is where our normal monitoring occurs. And we do annual inventories every year. They fast during this time, and after this there's a heavy period of foraging. Naturally they forage throughout the year, but most of it occurs right after molting and pupping, where they need to recover their energy. So our normal monitoring, this is the same for all 3 seal species, occurs through aerial surveys. These flight tracks here show you where we survey in the Baltic Sea for grey seals. We have some volunteers further north and further south where there are haul-out locations. They have a high fidelity to their haul-outs, so we visit all the known haul-outs every year. And we take pictures of the haul-outs, and then we count the number of seals. So here's an example from the grey seals. Every yellow dot here is a seal, so there's 790 seals hauled out on that little rock. And this provides us with a population index and a distribution indicator during the haul-out time. So we don't actually know where these seals are the rest of the year. We just know what they're doing during these 2 weeks when they're hauled out, and we can see them. So we don't see all the seals. We think we see about 60 to 80%. These are the results from the entire Baltic. So in 2020, 40,000 seals were counted in the Baltic. So these surveys, they occur throughout the Baltic. Every country bordering with the Baltic that has grey seals conducts the same aerial survey during the same 2 weeks every year. So we have about a 5% annual increase rate right now. This box here, you can see all the orange dots are the haul-out sites, and within this box is about 80% of the seal population is found there. But again, this is only during the molting period. And grey seals are unique among the pinnipeds in that they can pup both on ice and on fast ice and on ice floes and on land. And a survey in 2001 in that core area I showed you showed that there were 2 land pupping sites that they could find then in the Stockholm archipelago. But a study from 2008 in Estonia showed that there was a difference in the survival and the quality of the pups born on land compared to the pups born on ice. So they will pup on ice or on land depending on how much ice is available. But pups born on land had a higher mortality rate and a lower weaning weight compared to the pups born on the ice. And the Baltic Sea has been showing a declining trend with the ice coverage since the 1800s, and the lowest sea ice extent recorded so far was in the winter of 2019. So we are expecting this to impact the importance of the land pupping sites for the grey seal. However, we don't know where these sites are today. So we wanted to find out where are the land pupping sites, how many are there, and how many pups are born at each site. Because if we don't know where they are, we can't protect them or monitor them at all. So this was funded by the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management, actually as a part of looking over the Natura 2000 areas in the Baltic, where the grey seals were not identified. So they asked us, where do they pup? And we said, we don't know. So we had to find out. And actually, the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management funds all of the monitoring work that we do. So we conducted an aerial survey where you can see the tracks here. So we went all the way up to Umeå, where the ice edge was. We were not able to do the inventory on the ice this year. It's quite a big undertaking. And then we went down to Hanöbukten in the south and all around Öland and Gotland. So we covered basically most of the Swedish coast in the Baltic. And then again, we look for any indications that there are pups, and then we photograph them and we count them afterwards. So what we found, compared to 2001, we found 38 land pupping sites as opposed to 2. Most of them are in the Stockholm archipelago. We had 7 observations from Bothnia Bay from icebreakers that reported in that they saw pups. And we had 2,747 pups. But 38% of these were found on one island in the Stockholm archipelago, on Söderskär. Some observations is that they pup on very diverse substrates, so they seem quite flexible in where they want to pup. This is from Gotland. It's a bit difficult to see. You can see the spread hours here. They indicate small white pups. And then we also found pups on these very small Scaries far out, which was quite surprising because they're not ideal. When the pups are born, they have this white lanugo fur and they can't really swim. And if they fall in the ocean, they will drown and die. So we weren't expecting to find pups on these islands because when there's a storm, they will be swept out into sea, most likely. This is Söderskär, so this is more what we were expecting, these more bigger vegetated islands. All these white dots here, they're pups. So there's some snow, most of it are actually pups. And then this is a picture from the Icebreaker Frey, from the pupping on ice. So, as I mentioned, there was very high pupping density. Every yellow dot here is a pup, and there's a few dead pup observations too. And it was busy. So you can see there's here some mating going on. There are some sea eagles predating on pups. So actually figuring out what the mortality rate of the pups is very difficult because there's high predation from sea eagles and there's also pups that are in the water dead. So the number of observed dead pups I wouldn't take as a good indication of the actual mortality of the pups on land. And you can see pups in different stages of molting. So they will molt from this out of this white lanugo before they go in the water. So you can also use this data to look at when the peak of the pupping cycle is if you would repeat the survey a few times during the pupping season. So looking at this and then compared to this white pristine conditions you have on ice, as you can see, and as a study from Estonia shows that there's a increased risk here of the mother taking longer to return to her pup once she's been at sea to feed, and delayed nursing can have impacts on the pup's growth, but also an increased risk of disease transmission and increased risk of conflicts going on when they run into each other or when males are trying to access females for mating. So this was the first extensive land pupping survey of gray seals in the Baltic on the Swedish side. And we can confirm that gray seals are still pupping on the ice and on land. And we found many new land pupping sites, and this can in part be due to the increasing gray seal population, but also partly due to decreasing sea ice. And the most important pupping site, Söderskär, is not protected at all. Currently, hunting is not allowed during the pupping season, so it is protected that way, but people can visit this island easily, well, if you have a boat, during the pupping season. So we are going to continue monitoring pup production, we hope, on an annual basis in the core area. We have funding for next year, and we hope to negotiate for funding to continue doing this in the future, and then do a bigger distribution survey where we monitor the whole coast for new pupping sites every 5 years or so. And we want to replicate this Estonian survey to look at the consequences of pupping on land versus ice, because the pupping sites in Estonia look very, very different to the ones we have in Sweden. And that's all I had for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Anja.